I can't see you, man. You've got the light right behind your head, not into your face. What's the matter with you?
Think of this more of a heavenly apparition than an interview down the line. That's the line that I'm going with. This is, rays of light coming from the heavens. That's the way to look at it.
I was thinking more like man in polo neck, monster from the deep, is talking to us on Drive. Benedict, welcome. I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you. Yeah, I'm going to give you. Have you got a pen and paper there?
I have.
So you can go with Andrew and the alleged Chinese spy to start. You can go with Keir Starmer, the worst, least popular Prime Minister ever, wants to go back to the EU. Or you can go to my absolute favourite story of the day, which is a convicted terrorist who's been jailed for 4 years for being a jihadi propagandist, is actually suing a pub in Amersham. The landlord's on this show later, because he believes the picture is racist.
I mean, I will start with that because I find this slightly surprising. I would have thought somebody who was convicted of spreading jihadi propaganda would be completely on board with the idea of beheaded Middle Easterners, being depicted all across this country. I'd have thought that would be the exact sort of thing that he'd be very keen on, given that that's what a lot of his friends were up to when Islamic State were riding roughshod over Syria and Iraq. They were cutting off people's heads left, right and centre. They didn't find that particularly offensive.
Nope.
If anything, they felt it didn't go far enough. So this idea that this might be offensive is, as I think you've alluded to, this is somebody taking the pee, trying, where possible, to get a little bit of money for themselves, trying to score a little cultural victory, and probably knowing full well that there'll be many people in the justice system who might actually sympathise, who would look at this and not see it as a piece of history or, a cultural relic, but as something that is racist and has to be got rid of. So I'm almost certain that he will find people who are probably very sympathetic.
God. But just that point, this is, maybe it's time to be pensioned off. He says that if he wins the 1,850 quid from the landlord, Robbie Hayes, who's on the show in about an hour, he's going to set about another 30 pubs. Let's just cut to the chase. This man, as you quite rightly said, went to jail for spreading jihadi propaganda. Number one, what's he doing in our country? Why wasn't he deported? Sorry, that's how I say it. Oh, he's a British citizen. Right. If you're a British citizen, why are you advocating all the terrible things that you're advocating? I believe that your liberty should be taken from you. But number two, you said it and you're right. There will be some lawmaker, some judge, some wet, wimpy solicitor who's going to take the case. I want to... This is going to be terrible. I want somebody in authority to say, no, that's not happening. I want a Donald Trump person to say, no, it's thrown out. You can do... I don't understand how they believe that... I don't know the right phrase. The majority of people, I hope I'm right in saying, in this country do not see this as absolutely ridiculous, appalling, a waste of time, a waste of money, and it makes us look what we're beginning to look like, Benedict, which is we're just beginning to look stupid, man, as a country, aren't we?
We are, and people would be surprised, I think, how far just saying no to these kind of people can go. If you just know... Well, that sort of shuts down a lot of their avenues. And it must be said, it's one of the things I found particularly disappointing in our political class for so long, that they pick and choose the things that they're prepared to say absolute hard no discussion on over. This is the sort of thing that they're probably more than happy to go, oh, well, maybe, well, let's look at this president, let's look at that president, can't upset this community, can't upset that community. Whereas, for instance, if it's something that they feel very strongly in the other direction, they will just say no. For instance, things like lockdowns. Can we have a discussion on this? No, you're just going to be locked down, or things like that. It's entirely based on political choice, and that is why we do have to recognise people, certainly on the left in this country, who want some form of cultural revisionism, if not a complete tearing down of the system. They do look at these things, and they don't look at them and say, there's a remnant of a past of this country that we might want to hold on to. This is, the Saracen's Head is a famous, quite a famous name for lots of different pubs around the country, taken from people who went on crusades and would come back, and that's just sort of how it was. That's a cultural relic of this country, and lots of people in the modern age think that this is something that we should be ashamed of and should look to get rid of. Dare I say it, there's something very Puritan about it. I mean, we have got lots of pubs in this country that are called the King's Head, many of which once upon a time would have been called the Pope's Head, but were all renamed because you can't call a pub the Pope's Head after the Reformation, because that might offend the Protestants. You had to get rid of that sort of thing. So it really is going back to that really grim phase in English history where we got rid of Christmas and you couldn't celebrate this and you couldn't celebrate that. And I have to say, it's incredibly depressing that we're even having to consider this. But we are, because as I said, there will be people who will go, well, I agree with him. It does seem a bit racist.
I think I'm a cultural relic. I listen too much to Ricky Gervais. I just don't understand what's happening, and it embarrasses me. Let's move on. This afternoon, we have to say alleged. An alleged Chinese spy with links to Prince Andrew has been named as Yang Tembo after a court order protecting his identity was lifted. This was the High Court earlier. Benedict. Richard Tice, who's on the show in an hour, he was going to, under parliamentary privilege, give that out, but it was done by the High Court. I don't want to talk about Yang Tembo. He's an alleged Chinese spy. As somebody said, he looks like something out of Johnny English. But Prince Andrew has responded to this by voluntarily withdrawing from Christmas celebrations of the royal family in Norfolk. Bet they're gutted. He's going to stay in Royal Lodge. Two things for you. One fact. He has to be the worst judge of character of anybody in the history of the universe. I cite Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, now followed by a Chinese spy. Two, your thoughts on both these points. Two, you're much straighter down the line than me. This is just my opinion, nobody else's. One sits here thinking, so you lost the civil list, which was £250,000 a year, but you're able to stay in your house, which I know costs £300,000 a year. Just making the point, Benedict Spence. Thoughts?
I mean, you said it yourself that this individual looks like something out of a Johnny English film. And I have to say, given that he felt that Prince Andrew was a useful target, it sort of suggests that that's the level of Chinese intelligence, actually, that if they looked at him and thought, oh, that's a goer, that's one that'll give us lots of influence and access. Perhaps we don't need to be quite as worried about Chinese intelligence as previously thought if these are the sort of people that they're targeting. On the question of quite how it is that this particular member of the royal family may or may not come about his money having lost so much of it, I think that we need only refer actually to the conversations that were leaked and were published in, I believe it was The Times last week, where it was said that one of the reasons why Andrew was targeted was because he was, quote, desperate. And I think that you can read into as much of it as you want from there without necessarily having access to any more evidence. But I think that it is very well known that he finds himself in a very desperate situation. And this may go some way towards why it is that somehow he is actually getting even worse at picking his friends.
Well, Tom Tugendhat made a really good point earlier, and I thought Robert Jobson nailed it. Tom Tugendhat called him a useful idiot, and Robert Jobson said, I'd agree with that. I'd just remove the word useful, because he probably doesn't know anything. But you can imagine, from the Chinese's point of view, because he's as pliable as tree. I mean, honest to God, man. The king's brother, that's what the thing. Everybody doesn't even know the name of his... He just probably doesn't know anything, but I guess it's a sort of tick. Let's move on to your favourite subject. Sir Keir woke up this morning, quite sad actually, because he was... opinion poll said he's the worst Prime Minister in modern history. Bear in mind we've had Liz Truss. And then he decided to announce that he was sending a surrender squad ready to junk Brexit for a closer EU tie. His 100 civil servants will run a team set to abandon the freedoms of leaving the bloc. It comes as the UK formally joined the Indo-Pacific Economic Trade Pact over the weekend, a move made possible by regaining powers through Brexit. I'd have thought right now we've got this great example where we could make a trade deal with America, because let's be honest, Trump's an Anglophile. This man is going against... he can have no future, Starmer, if he carries on at this, can he? I know he's got 5 years, but really beyond that. I mean, he's a dead man walking already, isn't he?
He's a complete fool. The only way that we could strike a good deal with the European Union in our current context is through a process of deregulation and massive economic growth, and actually going after economic growth so that we would create something of a competitor state alongside the European Union. That would be the sort of thing that might make them more pliable to come to the table and offer us concessions. I could sort of understand, if we were doing that, why you then might want to entertain the idea of negotiations if there was some sign that Europe itself actually wanted to give you some things in return. But they don't. And they don't because we're not. Because actually, even though we've left the European Union, we really haven't deviated course at all. Actually, a lot of the things that we're pursuing are the exact same things that we were before. Our energy policy is even worse somehow. And so the European Union will be looking at us and going, these guys really are, they're clueless, they're soft touchers, they don't know what they're doing, and they are weak. And the fact that we can't envision a future where we more closely align ourselves with Southeast Asia and the Pacific, or with the United States, which are both growing at an exponentially faster rate than Europe are, the fact that we cannot envisage that, global Britain cannot think that far ahead, shows actually that we are sitting ducks, and that even though we had Brexit, we entrusted it to the worst possible people. And I do mean the Conservatives here, actually. I have to be honest here. As much as we can criticise Keir Starmer, the deal that we got was not the deal that we should have got. It was not the deal that we were promised, because it was negotiated by people who have absolutely no cojones or vision, frankly. People who were very scared of going too fast just in case they got it wrong, rather than actually believing what it was that they sold to people. And, I've heard Boris Johnson talking about this, on various podcasts. Why was it that you didn't have a deal in place? Oh, well, that wasn't my job, and we had to sort of do it on the hoof. And you just think, honestly, we entrusted this to the very worst people, the people, in fact, that we were trying effectively to reform and replace in the Conservatives. And now they have given it to Labour, who are just even more clueless and more procedural than the Conservatives.
Great word.
Backbone. They are just going to do this because it is the easiest thing, and also because it is politically easier for them to go, oh, well, we're getting nice and close to Europe because Trump is mean. That's ultimately what this is, and they think that will win them points. In the short term, it might, because people can make very silly decisions. But I tell you what, 5-10 years, when people really feel how much poorer they are, I don't know how long he can survive. Honestly, it has been a disastrous first 6 months.
I never thought, and we say it most days, don't we? I sort of had an idea of what it was going to be like, because I'm old and I've been under a socialist government before, right? Yeah.
Because you're a cultural relic, Jeremy.
I'm a cultural relic. Fantastic. But I can't genuinely work out whether it's complete incompetence, a blind belief that he's got 5 years and it doesn't matter. Some of the decisions are so ludicrously short-sighted that I actually... Shall I tell you why I think Starmer won't survive?
Go on.
Because I think even people inside the Labour Party, well, it'll be two-way. It'll either be somebody going, he's not left enough, right? Or there'll be a coup. Or it'll be somebody like a Wes Streeting going, this is barking mad. We'll never be elected for another 30 years unless we take the foot off. It's ridiculous. There doesn't seem to be any sort of plan. And listen, he might be there for 5 years, but I'll tell you something. He is going to go... I mean, we've had a few bad ones, but he's going to go down as one of the worst ever. It's extraordinary to me. Extraordinary.
Yeah. He will, but I think there is one thing that he is banking on, and I don't think this is an unfair bet to make, and that is that for as long as the Tories and Reform both exist at the same time, neither of them will get the critical mass needed to get themselves over the line. And here's the other thing, and I know lots of your listeners will say there needs to be a coalition, there needs to be a deal. Do not underestimate how much people in the Conservative Party absolutely hate Nigel Farage and would be happy to lose an election to see his career ruined. Don't take that out of the equation. And also, don't take out of the equation just how much an awful lot of Reform voters feel betrayed and hate the Conservative Party. Yeah. I think only one of them, I think, can survive long term. For as long as they're at each other's throats, I think Labour has a path to victory. Not a big majority, but I think it'll always be there.
I can't see them winning, but you make a really salient point because the others cut each other's throats. Talking about cutting, the moustache has gone. Movember, it's gone. What, you look younger without it.
Younger and fresher, and yeah, everything's on the up. I think I look a lot... Do you know what? Bashar al-Assad has lost his place in Syria, so now the days of the great Middle East dictators with moustaches are finally over, and I've had to change with the times as well. If he'd had a moustache as good as mine, he'd probably still be in power.
The Middle East dictator in Norfolk, Benedict Spence, thank you very much indeed. You're a legend.